Hello, minions. It's Wheezy. You know it's Wheezy. It's always Wheezy. but, yeah, it's time for me to do a full commentary. and, I was trying to think what I wanted to talk about. And my mail-in ballots came in the mail yesterday. Which, in case you're wondering, so I don't have to go to the polls. My wife and I have registered mail-in, so we can either mail in our ballots early, or we can go and drop them off at located drop spots around town. And it's the full, it's the House of Republic or the House of Representatives race, House of Republicans. It is right now, the presidential election and local elections. And before you turn off, because it's going to be a political video. I'm not talking about real politics. I'm talking about a vote that's actually coming up for where I live in Colorado Springs. I believe it's Amendment 64 is up for vote, which is to legalize marijuana for people over 21 years of age. And I figured that would be interesting to talk about because I have never partaken in any recreational drugs unless you count alcohol, which some people might. But with it being legal, I guess, I don't know if you'd still call it a drug. But I've never done, smoked marijuana or done any of the harder drugs. Never been interested in it, never been pressured into it, never tried it, never cared to. But this vote is coming up to legalize it, and I have to be perfectly honest that I am 100% in favor of this, and I will be voting yes, as will my wife. And I just thought it might be interesting to talk about because when it comes to if you have to line yourself up with political views, and quick aside, I have a big problem with the two-party system that America's turned into because it wasn't designed that way, and it really pigeonholes the system and makes this choice of two polar opposites that I don't 100% agree with either side. I do agree with one side significantly more than the other, however. But if you had to pigeonhole myself into a political party and I wasn't going to choose one of the two main parties, which I do, then I would probably be closer to a libertarian. And for those who don't know, a libertarian is someone who is, the tagline is socially liberal and fiscally conservative, where basically when it comes to social issues like, drugs, I guess women's rights, marriage, things like that, I tend to be more liberal in my views. Not because I sympathize with those perspectives, but because I'm of the opinion that it's not the government's place to tell people how to live their lives when it doesn't affect anyone else. And I think most social issues fall into that. I think the government exists to protect people, to protect the cohesiveness of the country, to keep it financially secure, which could be its own video. I could go on forever. And to keep the citizens from causing harm to one another. And there are arguments that can be made there, but there are some things that can't be argued, right? Murder has to be illegal. Assault, theft, these kind of things that directly are one person hurting another. That the government's place is to make laws and to enforce laws about prohibiting these kinds of things. But when it comes to what kind of things you can do with your body, what you can put with your body, what put in your body, what kind of things you can say, what kind of things you can do that only affect yourself, I don't think it's the government's place to tell you that. I mean, this government was founded on liberty with the idea that the government's place wasn't to run your life. It was to keep you secure and preserve your fundamental liberties. It's what the Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and the subsequent constitutional amendments are all about, is establishing and preserving freedoms. And when it comes to social issues, Democrats are much better at that. And a libertarian viewpoint is again kind of Democrat on social views and Republican on fiscal views, where the fiscal conservatism comes from, if you don't want the government to be controlling people's lives, you also don't want the government spending a lot of the people's money. And it seems logically like it would go hand in hand, right? Like if the government doesn't have as much obligation to dictate people's lives for them, then it doesn't require as much money to enforce. But it's the way it's become from the Democratic Party is kind of the opposite, where it's focused a lot on big government, but not so much on infringing on social issues. Without bundling it all together, but the general direction you can kind of call that is entitlement programs, i.e. welfare, Social Security, and just general government oversight of the private sector and of business, people's, just where the government shouldn't be, or where the government should have minimum impact, where they should make sure that people aren't being dishonest and aren't hurting each other, but they shouldn't be trying to enforce policy from a government level, as well as not spending all of our taxpayer money on, liberally social-oriented objectives. So putting that primer in there, right? When it comes to voting to legalize marijuana, I fall on the socially liberal side of it, where it's a social issue, not a fiscal issue, and it's actually kind of a little bit of both, and it falls right on the line perfectly in both sides, because for the amendment we're voting on will legalize marijuana for people over 21 years of age with a restricted amount, right? I mean, they're not going to say that you can carry around 3 pounds, because that goes back to the idea of distributing. And whereas before, the idea of distributing was more severe because you weren't allowed to have marijuana at all, the idea of distributing now is that you will be licensed if you're going to be growing and selling marijuana, so that there is government oversight to make sure that you're not doing anything unhealthy for the people who are going to be consuming, and also for tax purposes, because if you're going to be benefiting from this legalization of marijuana, then they are going to tax you on your sale of it, and not do any of these just person-to-person transfers under the table anymore. You sell it in a store, you're licensed to sell it, just like any other retail outlet. You pay the taxes to the government on the sales. It further specifies that the first $40 million of a collected marijuana tax goes straight back into the schools. And so that's perfect, because it raises revenue to go towards a worthy cause, and it's funded by the legalization of something that a lot of conservatives have believed should be illegal for a long time. And the stats are pretty clear on the fact that marijuana is less harmful to people than alcohol is. And maybe for some people that gives the argument for reinstating prohibition. But more commonly, the argument is, if people are allowed to drink, why not smoke marijuana? If it's less, it's less harmful for you than cigarettes, and that's legal. And it looks like this is finally becoming an issue that's going to get voted on, and as more places start to pass these amendments, I think it'll become more and more common. So maybe Colorado's going to help lead the way and pioneer this. I hope it passes. I haven't been following, I don't know if they've been polling on seeing if they think it's going to pass or not. I know that I'm pretty much a conservative, and I'm in favor for it. I work with a lot of conservatives by virtue of the field I work in, of defense. But a lot of them are in favor of it, just for the sake of, why fill up prisons and spend more taxpayer money on prisons to put minor offenders in for something that really shouldn't be illegal to start with? So that's one side of it. And another side of it is, it doesn't change any of the social stigmas of it, right? Like, my employer has the same status on it before and after this law. the same thing that they do with alcohol, is that you do not have any in your system when you go to work, regardless of the legal limit. You just are sober when you're at work, or you lose your job. I mean, I think most jobs are that way, and I think all jobs should be that way. And there are already laws in place for what qualifies as DUI when it comes to marijuana, not just alcohol. So there's no need for new laws there. The idea here is just to get rid of filling prisons and the court system with these petty offenders, and I'm in favor of that. So I'm curious what your opinion is on it. I suspect that I'm gonna have very few, if any, differing opinions on legalization, because you guys tend to be on the younger side, and based on the YouTube demographics, but I can't always be trusted, but you guys are below 40 years of age in general, and I think that's about the sweet spot for people who are less conservative, grew up in a society that is less repressed, maybe is the better word, because for hundreds of years people have been depraved privately, right? It's become more common over time for certain aspects of that to be more public, and some of them even more so than they probably should be with your Paris Hiltons and such. But I mean, I think the younger generation is going to start making these moves, and I think that's what you're starting to see now as young punks like me are starting to get older. I'm 28 years old, god damn it. Practically an old man. But interesting side note on my channel, and I don't know how much of it is, again, people just making up what age they are on YouTube, but the demographic for my channel doesn't skew towards the lower end like a lot of video game channels would, the lower demographic being 13 to 21, I think, as YouTube classifies it. My demographic tends to fall more between the 21 to 35 or 21 to 40 range, which I think is good. I think it's great. Not that I discriminate or dislike. I've mentioned this before. My younger viewers, or even people older than that, right? But there's a certain level of maturity expected on my channel, and I think the young people that do stick around, even though they're in more of the minority than I expected, I think they're probably the more mature ones, or the ones who, I don't know, perhaps are being rebels and watching Wheezy swear all the time and say horrible things. But anyway, that being said, I think the whole point is that I don't think there's going to be a lot of differing opinions in the comments when it comes to this issue, because I think for young people, being socially liberal is more common and will continue to become more common, which will make the social side of the Republican platform a lot more obsolete. And I believe it will also start to change over time. But the reason I'm going to try and avoid a full-on political discussion, I may do it before the election if you guys actually care to, but the reason I don't want to do that is because along the same lines, a lot of people who fall under the socially liberal category tend to associate themselves with the Democratic Party. And I think in some cases this is a mistake, because perhaps they think because they associate themselves as Democrats that that's the party line that they need to toe, which I think is a fundamentally flawed issue with the two-party system in the United States, which again isn't a legal precedent set up. It's just something that's evolved over time by people trying to struggle to control power. But you don't have you pick a party, pick a Democrat or Republican Party. You don't have to agree with everything they say. You just have to focus on what's the most important issue to you. They call it key voting, key issue voting. For me, for the longest time, that was defense. Right now, it's the economy, because I have 2 children, and my wife recently, through cuts to education, lost a job, and it cost us $14,000 a year in income. And the company that I work at has been scaling back or eliminating raises to stay competitive in an economy where our competitors aren't doing so well. We're actually doing quite successfully, but so as not to price ourselves out of the market. In a down economy, we've been reducing the amount of pay increases we get, the amount of people we can hire, with the deadlocks in the government right now, and the fact that president can't get a single vote on any of the budgets that he's proposed. This issue of sequestration could cost my company 20,000 jobs, and that's unacceptable. And again, staying away from that because you can get into whose fault it is that we're deadlocked, but I'm getting into this video I'm not talking about. If you guys are interested in that, let's talk about it. But the point I was trying to make is that a lot of people who are socially liberal think that they have to be democratic when it comes to the fiscal side of the equation as well, and that's not the case. And anyone who looks at the stats and really looks at the plans on the table and looks at where this country is headed financially right now, even if they're socially liberal, would not agree with the direction of the Democratic Party when it comes to government spending and the economy right now. Or maybe you are, and you're a full-party Democrat, and I'm fine with that if that's your opinion. But I would urge you not to toe the party line for the sake of toeing the party line. For me, for this election, social issues are less important than fiscal issues. Our country is not facing a social crisis. Social issues that are on the table now have been on the table for 10 years and probably will be for another 10. We don't have to settle those right now. On the other hand, if we don't settle the fiscal issues with our country right now, shit's going to get bad within the next 10 years, and that's not good for anyone. So that's where I stand on the overall subject of it. But the good thing about this amendment is that I can vote socially conservative, but not elect someone who's fiscally irresponsible. And if there's demand from you guys, you know, maybe I'll do a video like that. But I think, unlike this video, which will have a generally positive result, I think if I expressed my views and explained things, I think the more logical and reasonable people out there, like me, who maybe just haven't seen these facts, like I've researched them, would understand my point of view, even if they don't switch, right? You know, you can say, well, you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense. But there's a lot of people who just blindly disagree on party lines, you know. And since I tend towards the conservative side overall, if you're going Democrat, Republican, I'm a registered Republican. With the younger generation, that is less popular. And you will know that if you have a Facebook account or you're on your Xbox, and all you really see is Obama ads. At least that's all I see. And it's not like because people are liking and resharing the posts. No, I'm getting paid, sponsored ads that I cannot get rid of on my Facebook feed. And every time I launch my Xbox, I have a little video advertisement on the front page playing in the corner of an Obama ad. Which, by the way, is feeding you a bunch of, at best, mistruths, and at worst, outright lies. I find it insulting, which is my biggest issue with it. But the point is that that's the demographic. The younger demographic is liberal, and I think that there's a lot of liberals, especially among young people, who think that because they're socially liberal, that they're Democrats, and that they have to hate Republicans, and that's not the case. Yeah, if you guys want a more in-depth discussion on that, I could rant for hours, and I could give you some good links and show you some good videos that may be a little boring if you're not actually interested in finances and politics, but if you're concerned about the state of the country and you want actual facts and not just rhetoric, I've got some good stuff you guys could look at. But yeah, when it comes to voting to legalize marijuana, where do you guys stand? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my entire demographic is people who are toe-to-toe in line with me, but maybe they're more conservative. Maybe you guys think marijuana is evil. And maybe you guys have experience with marijuana. And it's weird because I'm voting to legalize it, but I still have a built-in judgment of people who smoke marijuana in that they are, you know, lazy, irresponsible slackers who, you know, only smoke because they think it's cool, and they give up their social responsibilities and this, that, and the other. One good thing I think about legalizing marijuana, which I'm excited for, is it won't be as cool anymore. I think there's a lot of young people between the ages of about 16 and 22 who smoke marijuana mostly because it's kind of a rebellious thing to do, because it's illegal and it's risky, but it's not. But it's safe. You're not going to hurt yourself doing it. But it's illegal, so, but the punishment for getting caught is pretty minor, although, more severe than it should be. So I think it's going to depopularize marijuana among young people, which I'm ready for. And if anyone who's over 21 years of age knows that alcohol is really cool up until it's legal for you to drink, and then it's, then it's still fun for social gatherings, but when it's no longer the risky and edgy thing to do, it's not as cool. And so that cuts down on the level of douchebaggery for, maybe we're not going to see any more 25, 30-year-old people smoking weed who are just like, man, you need to chill out and be cool, because they'll just be douchebags because anyone can do it. And it's no longer some cool rebellious thing to do, and you're not emulating Jamaicans and white boys with dreadlocks. So I'm excited for that as well. But with my wife being a teacher, $40 million into schools is a good idea as well, even though she doesn't work for the public school system, but we won't get into all that. So yeah, let me know what you guys' opinion is on the subject. I got sidetracked on an issue I wasn't even going to mention. I spent the second half of this video talking about something I wasn't going to. But yeah, you guys smoke weed, or do you want other people to? See ya.